And welcome everybody to another episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast. I am your host, Callahan, and today, helping me sculpt a winning mindset is my good friend. We're both now comfortably moved into our new places and our new cities. Yeah. We've got Ian, otherwise known as Comedian MTG on the internet, joining us live from Philly.
All right, Cal, can you read my Riverside name? I think that's much more.
Buttfart69, excuse me.
Yes, thank you. My new online moniker.
Excuse me. So Buffart69, or Buffart. Wow.
Buffart.
Buff tart. That's beautiful.
It's a very high protein Pop-Tart flavor.
You know, you have the sweet ones. You have this. It's the other side of Pop-Tarts, which is the savory Pop-Tarts.
What is that?
But I mean, that's like beef Wellington, right? Like,
oh god, is that
that's effectively what beef Wellington is, right?
That's meat Pop-Tarts. Is every sandwich just a meaty Pop-Tart?
Oh my god, are we getting into this? Oh no.
This is the real questions we answer here on the Mind Sculpt.
We have the real things that we need to be talking about, which is what is and is not a Pop-Tart is what really matters. Definitely not what the video title is. We would not do that to you. I'm definitely never done anything like that ever.
No, that's very unlikely. So to the point here.
Yes, very. So by the way,
yes.
Congratulations on your marriage to Gritty.
Yes,
how
Gritty
is it so far? How's the honeymoon phase?
Well, Gritty is a very passionate lover, and for that, I really feel like my needs have been met romantically. I'll be like in the morning, I'll roll over and look at Gritty, and Gritty's kind of there, like, I'm like, yeah, you bring up a fantastic point, Gritty.
Yes, that's a perfect. I think
I've been describing Philadelphia as a city with extremely high highs and extremely low lows, and just like sort of a surfboard flying through the waves that are both of those.
That's a beautiful way of describing it. I like to describe it as what happens when you take land away from rednecks.
I don't know what part of Philly you've been to, but I don't know about that.
The part of Philly where they just ride four-wheelers around.
Yeah, well, that has happened for sure. That feels more like the downtown area. I'm like sort of in the Fishtown area.
Okay, all right. I have moved into the like right downtown Louisville. So nice. And my favorite part of living on the fourth floor in an apartment building is not having direct access to my apartment when I'm carrying groceries in. Love that. Definitely. Like, so our apartment we had in Lincoln was like first floor, and our sliding door to our porch went right out to the parking lot. So we literally would just back our car up to it. Yeah. And I was spoiled for like 5 years.
Yeah.
And then we moved here.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, at least there's an elevator.
Yeah. I've done the reverse, where I used to be on the third floor. So I would like walk up multiple flights of stairs to get anything done. And now I have a glass door in the back of my place. Actually. Stuff's in.
I will say, living in an apartment building where everybody else owns dogs makes me feel infinitely less worried about my dog being like annoying to people because everybody else has a dog. So.
Yes. And is this where I can ask you to insert 2 pictures of my new cats and tell everybody how I'm doing?
Yes. You have a new cat. Well, 2 new cats. You have one that is named Gingataxius. I think it would be
shopping names.
Well, I think it should just be Elishnorn. Or you gotta go with the Praetors.
She's too sweet though. That's the thing. We were like,
and then you could just call her Norn. Yeah. Like it's perfect.
Norn sounds like a grandmother who just like refuses to let you speak loudly in the library.
Shh.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you don't know.
That feels like a Norn.
Phyrexian sensor, something like that. I don't know. Is that what Okay. So last month we did I had Tyler from Play to Win come on. We did our individual top 10 commanders for the month of May. And
I will say we both took our commanders, or multiple commanders that we mentioned in Tyler in their respective episode with you, and me, commander I will mention today, and took both of those commanders to the top 16 of SCG Baltimore. So I'm just just proof in the pudding. We're making our words count, I would say.
Yeah, I think if there's something that is to be said about the opinions on this podcast, is I may have hot takes, but I feel like we're generally in the right vicinity of where the take is. Every
time I listen to the podcast, I really do fluctuate between dead on and what the fuck?
Listen, it's talk radio, man. You gotta sometimes you're just gonna whiff on some takes, but that's okay. But so recapping, Tyler's top 10 for the month of May was at number 10, Crick, son of Yawgmoth. At number 9, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. At number 8, Magda Brazen Outlaw. Number 7, Tivit Seller of Secrets. Number 6, Rog Sai. 5, Krark and Sakashima. 4, Thrasios Bruce. 3, Najila. 2, Winota. And 1, Timna Crom. Wow. Wow. Oh, that's crazy.
I will say there are several on Tyler's top 10 that are not even on my list. So this will be interesting.
That was very much the case for me as well. My top 10 last month was at number 10, Dargo Thrasios. Number 9 was Tyam Luminous Enigma. 8 was Rog Sai. 7, I had Tevish Crom. 6 was Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. 5 was Atraxa Grand Unifier. 4 was Najila. 3, Thras Bruce. 2 was Tivit. And 1 was Timna Crom. So that was kind of what I felt about stuff going into the month of June. After June. So this is what's really interesting about the month of June is we got Lord of the Rings like mid to late month. And
we got Lord of the Rings, interestingly, on the weekend of 2 major tournaments.
Yes.
In which it was legal, but ambiguous enough where not everyone was sure it was legal. And therefore the impact of the cards is medium.
No, well,
it's like were really impressed by these cards, and some people were like, "Oh, I could play that? Fuck."
Yeah. Well, it's the talk of the town has been Orcish Bowmasters, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, it didn't work that much," and in the tournaments and stuff. It's like, okay, well, half of the participants weren't even aware they could play Lord of the Rings cards, so maybe let's pump our brakes. Like
it has, in my evaluations, to be fair, gone from the best card in the set to the 3rd best card in the set.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Like I stand by that. Casual is what's going to get this card banned, and it's going to be really annoying.
Yeah, is that we're not expecting it to get banned because of its cEDH potential. We're expecting it to get banned because casual players are going to really hate playing against that card.
Yep. I mean, if I sat down at a casual table and I played against a card, I would hate playing against it. So it's like it's
people hate wheel deck enough in casual as it is, and I can't imagine that. Another card that says I'm also ending the game prematurely after disrupting your game plan again.
I'm sure that will go over swell. But with that being said, like we don't really know the full impact of this set on the meta. A lot of it's speculation right now.
Yep.
So some of my picks I know for in the movement of my top 10 is anticipation for what I feel like is going to happen.
Yeah.
And
I find it very interesting that the Bowmaster is most impacted, in my opinion, 2 of last month's best decks.
Mm-hmm.
But like more than other decks disproportionately, which is really interesting. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and hop on in over here. So your number 10, I
would love my honorary mention.
Okay. Your honorary mention.
Okay, so my honorary mention for the month of June, transitioning into July, is the mechanic Flash. Because as of right now, there has been talk. So this is, I think, pretty safe to say, this has originated from the card Liberator Urza's Battlethopter. This is where this like mentality has come from, right? Then people started taking a second look at Raf Capuchin, the Azorius Flash Commander, which is the deck I am currently building and trying to break.
Bro, why are you not telling me this? I'm the Azorius person. Like, there's I know. Lavinia's right there.
I know. Hey, I started on Grand Arbiter. I get it too. But so that's a deck I'm currently working on.
Oh, Lavinia's also there too. I have 2 Lavinias on my background.
Yeah. No, we remember that you have a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure. Anyway, sorry.
But so now specifically with the printing of Gandalf the White, Flash strategies have been given a really big booster shot because now if you want to do stuff with artifacts at instant speed, you have Raf, Gandalf, Liberator, and Shimmermere all to provide extra oomph to that strategy. And if you just want things that care about legendary creatures getting Flash, you have Raf and Gandalf. And that's a little thing the kids like to call redundancy. Also, there's the new Born Onto the Wind. Is that what it's called?
Born Into the Wind. Yep.
Yeah. So the new instant that just gives everything Flash for 1 and a blue, and is a cantrip, just in case you needed an extra card while trying to win.
Everything Flash until end of turn, which is really good. It's like
it's crazy.
I talked about this in our set review where it's like it's not Quicken because a lot of people were comparing it to Quicken. I was like, no, it's an emergent zone.
Yeah,
like it's an emergent zone with a cantrip. Like,
yeah. And this is the thing, right? Like, so one of the reasons that, if you remember, like Temur Polyrog had like a weird run a little while ago, and I know Efond was one of the people who was like perpetuating that. And one of the things I would always talk about with Efond was he was like, "Oh, well, the reason this deck wins so much is because Crop Rot into E Zone." Like, oh, okay, so you're just winning over the top of people's wins all the time. And this is where a lot of like the Turbo Now strategies leaned into Final Fortune, right? But between Emergent Zone, the 2 legendaries that I just talked about, the 2 artifact flashers that are also one's a legendary, and Emergent Zone and Windbrisk Heights, there's like a stupid amount of ways to play. Oh, and Alchemist Refuge. Yeah, stupid amount of ways to play things in instant speed, like in this format right now. And when you're at a table rotation of 4 players, like I was talking, so Michael Levine, spoiler, top forward SCG Baltimore with Heliod, playing Emergent Zone, Windbrisk Heights, Shimmermere, Urza's Battlethopter, and Gandalf. Yeah. And he would come up to me after every single round. Meanwhile, he was undefeated until the finals, to be clear. Would come up to me after round and be like, "Oh yeah, Najila was swinging in for lethal, and I flashed in Ballista combo over the top of it." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, all right, man." Like,
fuck you. Like,
yeah, exactly, right. So it's a real thing. It really is, and I think it's one of the most underexplored spaces we have right now. Is just like Turbo Flash. Which is a triggering phrase for a lot of people, but I think it's something to explore, and I don't think every single deck should be jamming multiple colorless lands that give you instant speed wins on top of each other. I don't think that's it. I think it's just pay attention because these things are real, and decks that can take advantage of winning an instant speed are gonna start doing really well.
Well, and like even beyond that, so this was the other thing that I've often talked about when, the other obsession that I have, right, is Arden decks. And a card that I've often played in those decks was Sigarda's Aid. And people would be like, well, why are you playing that? And I was like, well, just beyond the fact that I could cast things at instant speed, you are just like literally quadrupling your action economy. In a 4-player game, you now get 4 more or 3 more opportunities to cast that spell in a rotation. And when you can usually only do that at sorcery speed, that's a huge change. So I'm right there with you. But
I think those cards. I mean, the cards that enable this strategy are kind of cracked. I think I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff coming down the pipeline, specifically for like turbo flash speed decks for sure.
Yeah. I think my honorable mention for the month of June is it's hard. I think it's probably going to be Animar just because it won SCG Baltimore. But this is also a deck that I have a lot of personal experience with because I have been in leagues and been in events where Animar has won stuff because everybody's playing Thrastimna or everybody's playing like the stuff it just doesn't care about. And it just will run over people. And it's another one of those commanders that enough people disrespect enough that they'll just ignore it or won't have the right removal to deal with it. And then it will just run away with a game. So like,
yeah, I'm a little sus of that, but I 100% get your reasoning.
Yeah. Like, obviously I'm not putting in my top 10. It's hey, this is more of like a broad strokes. Hey, respect every deck at the table. Like, I think we said that on the episode with Reed and you, right? Where we were talking about how like we can all like talk and theorize about what the best decks are in the format. But as soon as you sit down at a table, you can have your opinions about how viable something is, but you're now playing against it. So you have to deal with it.
Yeah. And this is kind of where I think this is actually a really clean transition into my number 10 spot. Because my number 10 spot is like 5 different decks.
Okay.
Because of this very reason. And I can actually add Animar to this list. It's Tayam, Rocco, Atraxa, Malcolm Tana, and Thrasios Dargo. And if you notice, each and every one of those decks are notably, with a little bit of squinting, creature combo decks. They're all creature combo decks that take advantage of the fact that people don't counter creature spells enough. And they take advantage of the fact that the format is in a place where, you know, people are afraid of ad nauseums and underworld breaches and things like that. And you can respect those things as much as possible, but at a certain extent, your opponents can play around that stuff too, right? Like I am and Rocco, like all those decks that like just they took advantage of people not knowing what they would get, right? And Malcolm Tana used to always just be like, "Oh, you don't have a counter for my Glinthorn turn 2? Ha ha ha!" And it's like what you're saying here, right? Like you got to respect the decks at the table because turns out creatures are hard to counter, and if you don't pay attention to it, you're gonna get pantsed pretty bad. Like so,
maybe play manager. Just
yeah, I mean,
if you can,
Dollmaker for a long time and in Tivit.
So number 10, you have 5 different decks.
I have a slew of decks. Yeah.
You have a slew of decks. I feel like that's cheating.
It definitely is. I would have put it in the honorable mentions, but I didn't have a deck that I thought was better than any of those options by a wide margin. So that's why they're all copy and pasted. Feel free to put like Tayam if you have to. You have to.
Noted.
One. Or pick Gandalf.
Or pick Gandalf. Right. My number 10 is a new addition to my number 10, which is Winota, Joiner of Forces. It is a deck that I think people are very cognizant of creatures right at this moment now.
Yeah.
And especially moving into this meta where Bowmasters is going to be played a lot more. And you're going to see more of these flash things. You're going to be seeing more of this stuff that's happening. I think Winota's ability to rebuild very quickly works in its favor.
Yeah.
Now,
Sure.
I don't think it is. I have a hard time putting it any higher than this. I didn't have it in my top 10 last month because, as you can probably well attest, it is a deck that people zero in on, and you sit down at the table and then you just don't get to play the game.
Yeah.
It is resilient enough to get through that from time to time. But like, I think it's in a tough spot overall. And I think it's probably the best of those tough spot commanders, if that makes sense.
It didn't make my top 10 because of this reason. And it's 100% because of the fact that you're playing at a disadvantage. And I never want to go into a cEDH tournament playing at a disadvantage. But right now, I feel like you are going into a tournament saying, I'm expected to get ganged up on by my opponents and expected not to be able to execute my game plan because of the way people have been reacting to this deck. Now, I've been working on a complete overhaul of the list, like genuinely like stripped down to bare bones. What do we need to keep? What do we need to go? I've killed some of my babies in the deck. It really hurts. But just in an attempt to get out from underneath this meta, and it's kind of sort of working. I haven't really had a lot of time to test it because I've been moving and trying to start content as a full-time job and all that stuff. But I got a list. It's quite different from my database list right now. And we'll see if the updates come in. So
yeah, I mean, and just to be clear here, Phil Gallagher posted on Twitter earlier today, like asking for deck suggestions for cEDH viable tournament lists because he no longer sees Winota as if you're trying to win in a tournament, a viable strategy for that. And I don't think that's too far off because the numbers, if you look at the conversion rate on EDH top 16, it's sub 10. Like it's a single digit number.
Yeah. And I also say like they're one of my favorite decks in the format right now that I think is one of the best decks in the format also has a really low conversion rate. So that's interesting too. But
I don't know that the conversion rate it says everything because again, like we talked about this a little bit last month. Like Tim Necrom is a really good example of a deck that has a lower than it should conversion rate because of the amount of people playing it.
Right. And Winota historically has been the kind of deck where you can have bad players play the deck and
it's the newbie deck. Like it has kind of been that deck. I fully stand by that. Like Pongo's Nagilist is probably the best newbie deck, but that's a whole different discussion. But so that's our top 10. So we have like what 6 commanders at number 10. Number 9, Ian. What's your number 9?
Atraxa, Grand Unifier.
Okay.
While I respect Atraxa a decent amount, I've also been in too many tournament games against Atraxa where it's been stuck on exactly 6 mana, and they use their entire hand to get 6 mana, and they're just waiting to top deck the Atraxa, and if they get there, they have a chance of winning, and if they don't get to the Atraxa, they literally do nothing and don't interact and just watch us all die. So that's the downside of the deck. I was just got off a coaching session talking about this deck with some people, and things I'm noticing is that like pilots have been making some bold choices with their mana bases, with their ability to resolve Atraxa. This is one I'm going to get in a fight with you about. Is their evaluation of the card Delighted Halfling? I think this card is the most overhyped card in the set. I think by like a ridiculous margin. I think the amount of decks that think they can have a Boreal Druid in their deck and can't are way too high. Like legitimately, the amount of times I just deck teched an Atraxa deck that had 3 legendary permanents in the whole deck, and I'm like, what do you okay? Your Atraxa is uncounterable. Congratulations, as a thing, right? Like I don't know. I feel like it's just I think there are certain intricacies with the way that deck is being built currently that make it a little clunkier than it needs to be.
Well, and it's a food chain deck that's not playing Vivian Champion of the Wilds for some inexplicable reason.
What
and
Vivian are you talking about?
it's the 3 mana 1 for more of the spark that lets you cast creatures as if they had flash.
Why is that? Why is this necessary?
Why is that necessary in a food chain deck? We just got done talking about winning over top of people.
Yeah, I guess, but like
it also digs so you can find stuff. Like it's a very good card, and it's like the good food chain card in my opinion.
Interesting. I'll have to test it.
But nobody's playing that, and I'm just kind of like, hey, I feel like you should probably be on this. But
and I literally was talking with that player about like maybe we play Gandalf just so you can flash your Atraxes in. Like
no, play Vivian Champion of the Wilds. It's a great card.
Also, Gandalf does double Atraxa triggers, which is pretty hot.
True. That is very true. That is really hot. Holy shit.
Yeah.
So it's like a second Elish Thorn. Whoa. That's really good.
Yep.
Yeah, so you have Atraxa at number 9. My number 9 is another Ian deck. This was another deck that was not in my top 10 last month, and it is moved up just begrudgingly, and I'm going to it won and did enough in the past month that I kind of have to say, like, okay, fine. But I feel very like I'm not going to be super surprised if in a month from now, when I sit down to record next month's top 10, that it's not in the top 10. And that's Kinnan Bonder Prodigy.
Oh, you're drunk. Get out of here.
It is.
This deck is so good.
It's good. So good. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I just think it loses on so many angles, and now it's got another angle to lose on. And so, like, that's my thing. Is it's like, okay, so you get shut down by Curse Totem and Null Rod effects, and you get
that's the thing about Kinnan is that it doesn't get shut down by these cards. I think that's one of the biggest misnomers about this deck is that because it has such a high redundancy of both effects, you don't give a shit. There have been so many times where like I've been Curse Totemed out and I'm like, okay, fine, I'm going to use this Mana Vault to cast a Consecrated Sphinx. Like,
sure.
And it has that flexibility that I feel like we don't talk about nearly enough. And it's like it has a Dockside without having a Dockside in the command zone at all times. I don't know. I think this deck is like crazy good. It's way up my list too.
I think it is a deck that is one of the commanders where if you just make it a rule of thumb to remove the commander whenever it comes down, you're going to be fine.
How that works, though. That's not. If you have the capability to take out a 2-mana commander repeatedly, the other players at the table are not playing the game correctly. Like, if you have the luxury of removing Kinnan over and over again, then the other players are saying, I'm not going to be a threat to you whatsoever. That's it. Yeah, I don't know. Because Kinnan is a big mana deck, right? So like the whole point of it is to have a bunch of mana sources. And so you should be able to cast Kinnan up to 6 times. Not like up to 6, but like for up to 6 extra commander attacks comfortably, right? Or once again, I've been locked out with Dran so many times and just been like, sure, I'll hard cast this Hullbreaker Horror. Let's see what happens.
And again, it's in my top 10.
Yeah.
It came up, but all I'm saying is that like my concern with the deck is going into a new meta that I'm not sure what it's going to look like. It is a deck that is creature reliant and is artifact reliant.
Sure.
And that is just one of those things where it's like those two things combined make me go, I don't know how I feel about it, but it keeps putting up results, so it's going to go up there. So obviously, like I'm very okay to be wrong about things, right? Like I think I said this earlier in the show, right? It's like I'm in talk radio. I'm going to be wrong about stuff. You're going to whiff, but I moved it up. I didn't even have it in. It was my honorable mention last month. Yeah. So that's my number 8.
Yeah, I have it up higher on the list. We'll talk
I'm
about
sure.
It
so did
more.
Tyler.
Yeah. Notably, 2 frequent Kinnan pilots. Huh?
Yeah, weird. Wow, the sun is hitting me at a beautiful spot. I don't know if you can see that beautiful spot right there on my cheek.
That was me this morning. I was like literally blocking the window so the glare would not come in.
I've got a decent lighting setup right now,
Yeah.
but I just need blackout curtains, and then we'll be.
Yeah, half the rooms in this place do not have curtains, so.
Oof.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Number 8, Ian. What is your 8th best deck in the format?
Yeah, so this
right
was
now?
one that I was scrolling through EDH top 16, and I was like, man, this feels like people don't play this deck probably enough, and that's Tim to Malcolm.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think just the win con density is a reason people don't play it as much as they probably should. I think display circuit and combos are probably something people should be playing in the deck.
Yeah.
I just think it's really solid. It's like it feels like a very boring answer because it's a Timna deck, but like Malcolm provides you a ton of mana advantage. Timna provides you a ton of card advantage. It's not the sexiest thing you can be doing. It's not the like most commander efficient thing you can be doing, but it's a solid value engine. It gets you a bunch of card advantage, and pilots don't play the deck a lot because I think it's kind of boring. But when they play it, they all do really well with it. I've noticed. So I don't know. It's
Malcolm Timna is very much my type of deck, right?
Yeah,
like it's the most by the books Magic deck you could build.
It is, I will say, very aggressively hurt by Bowmasters.
Yes.
There are very few decks that are like actively bad for a Bowmasters to be in your pod. I think there's
Timna decks are those decks.
Timna decks get really badly shut off by Bowmasters. I think Crom gives you a little bit of strength against that card, but Timna Malcolm specifically is like, oh, I got a bunch of 1-mana dorks and this 2-mana command or 2 toughness commander. Like Bowmasters sitting there with a little machine gun, just brought the thing, the whole board. Like it's crazy. So
yeah, I totally I agree with you on that. Like it's
if you straight up get a clean like to full 3 Timna draw, you can go, okay, cool, I'm gonna flash in Bowmasters, ping your Timna. You're gonna draw your 3 cards, and then I will go, cool, kill Timna, kill Malcolm. Thanks. Like
this is fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's, there are certain decks that like get disproportionately affected by Bowmasters, and I think this is one of them that really does get hit by that card. But it can play it also, so God is dead.
Why is it black? I just
yeah.
It's a Rakdos card that is a black card, right? Yeah. Like it's just a modified Mayhem Devil when you really look at it.
Fit into several color combinations comfortably, but
anyway. Why is it 2 mana? There's just so many whys. Yeah. My number 8 is Rogsai, which where did I have it last month? I had
that's my number 7. So I think
I had Rogsai right at 8 last month, and it's right at 8 this month.
Yep.
It is, if you want to play a turbo deck, it's a good deck. It's not bad. I don't have a whole lot more to say than I did last month. But the general thing, if you don't want to go back and watch that, but you should, the general gist of my take on it just continues to stay the same of, you are making deck concessions of, I don't have any card advantage in the command zone. I don't have a win con in the command zone.
Yep.
So I am trading speed for this. So now I have to make concessions on the back end to make that work. And because of that, I just don't think it is like there's a reason we don't see these things make it down the stretch in a lot of tournaments.
It's one of the best Swiss decks and one of the worst top 16 decks. Like I feel like that is the hill I die on, is that like it's great for just sniping a couple wins in the Swiss, guaranteeing you make the top 16. But if you expect to win a bunch of single elim matches on Rogsai,
it's gonna be hard.
Know what the deck does, like they get the joke, they get the punchline. It's not like I hate the argument of like, oh well, we are a Ristic study deck, we have grind potential. So does literally every blue deck. Shut up. Like it's my least favorite and like least intelligent argument I've ever heard out of some people. It's like, yeah, okay, you can play cards that draw.
So can others, like, and they don't have to worry about
and like the argument of we have the best abuse of wheels. That feels like a safe argument to me, but it doesn't. It's not a guarantee, right? Like I don't know. It's one of those things that I think people really over exaggerate the current potential of the deck. It's not a glass cannon. Like, I think textbook definition of glass cannon, it is not. But it is hyper quick, hyper efficient, and therefore has an extremely low card quality.
I mean, it's also like, I think calling it a glass cannon isn't fair. Godo's a glass cannon, for instance. But maybe not. Yeah. But I mean, it used to fall under that category.
There have been versions of Go-Go that were very glass cannon, for sure. Yeah.
But like, if I were to compare it, me and my sports comparisons, like to me, it's very much that athlete who can't stay healthy. The guy who is this, like, I think about a lot of really like great athletes like Kevin Durant, AD, all these people in the NBA. They're generally centers, but they're extremely talented. They're very good when they're healthy, but they're not healthy all the time. So it's like, well, I don't, you're not a glass cannon, but I can't rely on you to be healthy all the time. But you are really good, and I'm going to recognize that. So that's kind of why I have it at 8. And so, and you have it at 7.
Basically, same conversation, different nuance, right? Like,
it's exactly the same. My number 7 is a deck you had mentioned earlier.
I will. Sorry, one last thing on Rock's side. I do think it is one of those decks that does take very good advantage of Born Upon the Wind.
Yes,
I think it's an extremely explosive deck, and the ability to be like, oh, that's so weird. You tapped out at such a bad time. I'm gonna Underworld Breach on top of your deck, and you're like, excuse me, right? Like that's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yep. Underworld Breach in your
end. Turns out, hey, remember Flash and remember winning on top of other people?
No.
Turns out that's good, regardless.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. My number 7 is Tyam Luminous Enigma. It's a deck that just kind of keeps putting up numbers, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know that I think it's as good as its results say. I moved it up from 9, but until it stops winning, like, what am I supposed to do here, right? Like, it just keeps top 4ing and winning events. So it's like, okay, well, fine.
So it's an extremely complicated deck, right? So if it's extremely complicated for pilots to learn it, imagine how complicated it is for someone who's working off of imperfect information, trying to beat a deck that can win at instant speed and can also win through a rule of law at instant speed, and can win with the resolution of a land drop. That's where the deck gets very interesting, right?
Right.
Where the deck gets easily disrupted is the ability to just kill Tyam. The deck does nothing without Tyam. Yeah, or counter Tyam. But I mean, killing Tyam is actually much worse than countering Tyam. If you can counter Tyam on the stack, you're doing great. The problem with the deck is when you get in situations where you're like, oh, well, let me remove this key piece stopping me. You're like, okay, well, they actually have a Sylvan Safekeeper there. And it's like, okay, fine. I'll throw a couple of pieces of removal at that thing. It's like, okay, it still hasn't died yet. And then they can go, oh, no, my important stacks piece died. I'm going to pay 3 and activate Tyam and bring it back to the battlefield. And you're like, oh, well, that was a waste of all that effort, right? That play pattern is pretty frequent in that deck. And then also sometimes they're like, oop, land drop, my Devoted Druid kills you now. And you're like, what? You know? So it's got a lot of gimmicks, but not in the way that they're bad. It's got a lot of gimmicks in the way that you can just be like, oh, hey, wait, we're dead. Okay, cool. Whoops. Yeah. Right.
Well, it's one of those decks that, I said this pre-show and I talked about this a little bit. I kind of lump it into that category of decks that are doing well because not enough people respect the commander. And it's, again, very much a deck where, like you said, if you remove the commander.
If people are going this hard on aggroing at Winota, they should be going this hard on aggroing Tyam. If anything, they should be going harder on Tyam because, well, I mean, I don't know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, right? Like Winota can win out of nowhere and explode. Tyam can do the same thing if you let it grind even slightly, right? So it's like, if you care about killing one commander, probably care about the other one. Also, Tyam has many more ways to protect it over time. then Winota gets access to. So like
also just I think one lesson that from watching gameplay of Tayam like in Mox Masters and stuff like that is be okay. Like I think there's a lot of people who need to get comfortable with accepting we're going to be under a rule of law for a few turns. And we're going to have to just deal with that. But this is the bigger issue right now. And like, it's just one of those things where you deal with the big stuff first and accept rule of laws there for a little bit. It is what it is. It sucks.
But Cal, if I can't cast multiple spells on my turn, how will people know I'm important? I don't think people get that I want to win the game.
I have to be able to cast at least two.
At least two.
At least two.
Come now. You rule of law players.
Oh, Lord. All right. Number 6. What do you got at number 6, Ian?
I have the 5-color Sisay.
5-color Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. What are your thoughts on Sisay? I had that at... Where did I say I had it last month? I had that at 6 last month.
Hey, nice. Sisay's kind of cracked a little bit. People keep finding new lines for it too. Dihada helped a bunch of lines of the deck. Cultists of the Absolute helped the lines of the deck. There's a bunch of people doing the Chromatic Orrery lines. There's the Planeswalker lines. There's 1,000 new legends from the new set that helped it a bunch. It got Mount Doom, which is like one of the best card quality upgrades in the deck because you don't need to play a crappy card as your outlet. You can just activate Mount Doom repeatedly, kill your opponents because it's a legendary land you can tutor.
That's hilarious.
Sisay's gotten a lot of really solid options. It's one of those decks that you need to learn the play patterns, and if you learn the play patterns, you can circumvent it. There are certain Sisay decks that exploit the ability to grab Cultist and combo that turn. There are other Sisay decks like the one that I run that are more about I want my engine, and then when I have my engine, I go for the win. And the coolest thing about Sisay, and I talk about this in my video that's going to be coming out, I guess you're probably going to release this Monday, right? So this on the video that has just come out on my channel last Friday. But on that video, I talk about how Sisay can be built in just so many different ways because of the plethora of legends that are available, and also legends that are at a certain CMC. And you can build your own combo lines. You can play Vivian Pod. You can play a number of different legendary.
You can just play a grindy console deck if you really want to.
Exactly. Like, you can use it as literally tutor Jace. You can use it as I have one combo line. I'm going to win with that. You can use it as I only win with creature combos. You can play it as a stacks deck. You can play it as like Sisay is one of the most adaptive commanders. You still have a general like there's a bit and you got to do the bit, right? But apart from that, there's a lot of different ways in which that deck can like provide a lot of solid dividends.
And it's a 3-mana 5-color commander, which means that it's great Jewel Lotus card.
Great Jewel Lotus. You get Deflecting Swat. You get Guardianship. It's like it makes Bloom Tender a powerful card, which is like Bloom Tender is a good card. It makes Bloom Tender a crazy card. No, I mean I love the deck. I love it. It's super flexible. It's very fun to play. It plays
it's fun to play against too. Honestly, like the times I've played against you, like the games that we've had were like, there's like interesting interactions on the board right now.
No, I mean it's you can really like create a lot of intricate and powerful lines, and like you have weird pieces that get you out of spots that other decks just literally can't get out of. It's really solid. I think it can be beaten by pilots who are good at solving the puzzle, right? So like I call it the puzzle deck of cEDH because a lot of the time you're like, okay, I have to tap this to get this. And when I pod for that, I get that to make a copy of this, untap this. And if I get that, I can untap both of them by moving to combat. And like, it's super fun to figure out those lines. It is. I'm a big old nerd because I'm like, untap, tap, tap, tap. But like at the same time, like if you're a pilot who on the other end can figure out, okay, this is how my opponent's out to win. You can go one well-timed removal spell right here, and I can throw up the whole thing. But they're hard lines for the pilot to figure out. So they're also hard lines for you as the opponent to figure out as well.
Right. I think one of the things that I had that thought was really interesting was when we were playing in Minneapolis
Yep.
And I was playing Tivit, and fun fact, I play Spellskite in my Tivit list.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very interesting to see how that was oddly disruptive. And the look of annoyance you gave me of just like sitting there looking at your cards, looking at my board, looking at your cards, looking at my board, just going, that's really fucking annoying.
Well, yeah, because there were like half of the combo lines involve you either like targeting a permanent to flicker it or targeting a permanent to untap it, and you could be like, 2 life, it's going to untap my
I felt great do it with that include in that moment. I felt very justified.
I think that's genuinely one of the most underrated cards in the format, if I'm being honest.
Especially in a Bowmaster's world. Are you kidding me? It is maybe one of the most, if you're playing blue and then anything else, probably should be in your first draft at minimum of a deck, in my opinion.
If you care about the health of your creatures.
Yes.
Right? Like that's which is not a big floor for a lot of decks, but it's a floor for some.
Yeah.
Like
I don't see Rog Sai playing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like Timnacrom, I don't think needs a spell Skype, but like Najila, I don't know. Najila living's pretty hot, right?
Turns out. So my number 6 is actually what I had at number 5 last month, and that's Traxa Grand Unifier. I think it's the best food chain deck in the format.
Sure.
Which isn't a high bar.
Yeah.
But part of what I really like about it is that and I said this last month, and I'm going to continue to say it, is that it basically gets to play the general game plan of Thrasios Tymna with the advantage of having a win con in the command zone.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge boon. I really like that about the deck. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think if, things get a little tinkered on that list, I think it could move back up the rankings.
Yeah.
I really sat and thought hard about this. And I was like, if I am going to play Sans Red, would I want to play the deck that has a win con in the command zone, or would I be playing Thrastimna? Yeah, I'm playing a Traxa. And so I think that the ability to win is really good. Now, that being said, I am moving it down because I do think Bowmasters is a little rough for these types of decks.
That interests me.
Mostly because the world, I overall dork decks I moved down a little bit, just because I'm like, I don't know how you're going to respond to this. And
I feel like Bloom Tender specifically got a lot worse, which is awkward because I was arguing that Bloom Tender was one of the top 5 cards of the format last week. Or like pre Lord of the Rings, I should say.
Yeah.
And now that card got a lot worse. I think in general, if people are using their Bowmasters to kill your mana dorks, then they are in a good spot in general, and you might be in trouble in the first place. That being said, like, there's a world where they're like, oh yes, thank you for all these like inadvertent triggers here and there, but like I genuinely think dork decks are still like fine.
Well,
right now.
I guess my reasoning for that is a lot of dork decks have followed along with what the turbo decks are doing, which is cutting land. Yeah. So in the dork decks that keep 30 lands in their mana base, you're fine. For the dork decks,
so the ones I play.
Yeah, exactly. So our decks. The dork decks that have dropped down to like 28, 27 lands, guys, I have some bad news. You're gonna have to replace some fun cards.
Saw multiple Atraxa decks with 28 lands.
You're playing a 7 commander,
7 fucking mana. Thank you. Like, are you kidding me? That's like, in what world are you trying to be like, yeah, let's turbo out Atraxa and also not have the mana to cast Atraxa? Like, why? These people are always like, oh, why can I never get the last mana to get Atraxa? Probably because you're playing 28 lands. Like, you're not even playing all the mana dorks available to you. Y'all are
and you don't have
you.
Ponder or Preordain or anything like that to draw you cards and get you through stuff. So it's like,
yeah, Yeah, no, all right, we're on the same page here, right? Like cards like Dark Confidant and Ponder are slow, yeah, but also they're still going to get you there when your
card
commander
advantage,
costs
baby.
7 mana. Yeah, right. Like,
well,
it's
and
craziness.
it goes back to the thing we were talking about with Rogsai, right?
Yeah,
is when you're making a decision with the commander that you are playing, and because of that, you are making deck building concessions.
Yep.
And there are only like maybe 2, maybe 3 decks in the format that don't have to do that.
Yep.
And Traxa ain't one of them, friends.
Yep.
Like it's just
one of the things I think we've been like falling into as a format, just like, is that people are building decks without ad nauseum, like they're ad nause decks.
Yes.
And I really think people need to take stock in what they're doing with their deck building and really take a second to be like, what am I doing with that? And if you're having trouble making these decisions, you can always hire me, because this is what I do full time.
One of the things that I always thought was really interesting was when I played, we had talked about this before. I think it was, what was it? Oktoberfest was Art and Silas had a ridiculously low mana curve, like low, almost as low as Rogsai. And we were like, okay, let's try ad nauseum in it. And so we play tested a couple of games with it in it, and we were like, holy shit, this deck ad nause is like ass, because all of the cards are reactive, interactive cards. They don't do anything for you.
Right.
And it turns out that your CMC is not what dictates whether or not you can play ad nauseum. It's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it.
Yeah.
And, it's the same thing with Atraxa. Like, I look at the deck, I love it. I want to build this deck because
literally, like, old versions of Kalia used to play like several 8 mana demons and ad nause and still be one of the best ad nause decks I've ever seen. It's like, okay, well, maybe there's something there. Like, there's a reason people are doing that, right? Yeah.
But yeah, Atraxa Grand Unifier, good deck. It's my number 6. I'm a big fan. I dropped it a little bit, like I said, just because I think dork decks, I want to see how they react before I, tell people, hey, this was a top 5 card. I want to see how it does. Yeah. There are a couple decks that I think, specifically decks with red that, and Tivit can kind of not worry about that. But I do think green decks in general, I'm a little soft on right now, just because of
this is one of the most interesting parts about that, right? Is that Atraxa is so similar to Tivit. And I think people have been caring too much about the green pip in Atraxa. Yeah. And I think building it closer to Tivit is actually part of the solution.
It is. I said this in the last episode last month. It is the second best, kitten deck in the format. Yeah, yeah. It's the only deck better than it is Tivit. Yep, agreed. That's it. Those are the 2 best kitten decks in the format, and it ain't close. Yep. And like I think that is something to man. You got me thinking. What if I build Atraxa and just take my Tivit list and just make it Atraxa
and then sort out? Probably better than a lot of Atraxa decks out there right now. Like, not to be a dick to other Atraxa pilots, but like legitimately, if you take a bunch of the Tivit shells and you put Atraxa in it, it's like, wait a minute.
Take Time Sieve out, make it Food Chain. That's actually really
the same deck. Swap. It's the same stupid deck. Yes. I've been trying to tell people this. It's the same deck. The only difference is Tivit sometimes gives you mana to interact after you resolve Tivit. Atraxa doesn't. Right? And that's why you play Gandalf. No.
Atraxa does do the beautiful thing of letting you see 10 cards, which is awesome.
I will say the biggest difference between the two is that a double ETB in Tivit doesn't end the game. It helps you get there. It does with Atraxa, for sure. Yeah. Atraxa 2 wins the game.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that in, what was it? Your Chaos Treasure series episode you just did. So let's get into our top 5. Number 5, what do you have, Ian, as your 5th best commander in the format?
Cannon Ponder Prodigy.
All right. Yeah. I think that if I were going to rank it more aggressively, I think 5 is about as high as I would put it too. Yeah,
I think the deck's cracked, to be honest. I think it does take skill, right? There's a reason there's like 10% of pilots do really well with Kinnan, and they're all people who have top cutted multiple times the same deck, right? It does take a certain floor of understanding of the deck, but every time I know someone who like gets good at Kinnan, they like swear that it's the best deck in the format. And I'm not saying like it is the best deck in the format, but like I'm very comfortable with it being number 5. And every time I go, could I have it higher up? And then I look at the other decks on there and I'm like, they're all really damn good, but it's still a conversation, you know?
I said this to you before we started recording. I was like, my top 5, I'm like, honestly, I feel like I could assort these in a number of ways and I would feel super comfortable with that.
It's also like a big part of it for me is like I am a tournament player, right? So I look at these decks and I go, how comfortable would I feel going, oh, shoot, I have to play this at a tournament? And I look at each of my top 5 and I go, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like even if they're decks I don't play a lot, I still go, this is going to be fine, you know? But yeah, Kinnan is solid. It's the most explosive deck in the format. I would argue it's more explosive than Rogsai. I gun to my head. I think it is. The ability to just double up your mana dorks turn 2 is just insane. Turn 1 dork into turn 2 Kinnan.
That's my. Kinnan. I'm never referring to it than anything else other than Kivin. That's amazing.
And then but the amount of times I've been like, turn 1 dork, turn 2 Kinnan, Sylvan Library is like totally great with me.
But Sylvan Library is a bad card though.
Oh, good. But like then there's also the mana rock starts where you're just like, sure, Crypt, Arcane Signet, Kinnan turn 1, and you're like, okay, turn 2, I'm probably hard casting a Consecrated Sphinx because I can do that. Like the deck just does dumb things like that all the time, and then God forbid you get a Seaborn Muse. The downside of Kinnan is like sometimes they can tax your interaction really early, and then you need your Consecrated Sphinx, your Hullbreaker Horrors, or your Comas to like dig you back into it.
Right,
but you can flip into some of the literal dumbest creatures in the entire world.
And now you have the One Ring.
Now we have the One Ring, which is a good card for sure. Yeah, I don't think it's like the craziest Kinnan card in the world, but like it's still a really good card.
It turns out it's better in a lot of decks than I thought it would be.
The One Rings, also the interaction with Seaborn Muse, I didn't realize how stupid it is, but
it's like 10 cards in a turn cycle.
Yeah, and you only lose 4 life.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part. Yeah. I thought it was burden. Like I thought you got damage every time you tapped it, and then I read the card again, and I was like, "Oh, cool! You're just untouchable for a turn, and you can draw 10 cards for 4 life and 4 mana." I'm like, stupid. That's dumb. I was talking with Pongo about it. I was like, "Hey, Pongo, I think Derevi is a real deck now?" Question mark.
Is Derevi playable? I remember what was it? Cobble brought that up in our set review we did.
Like honestly, like I feel like Derevi, like being like I play Tezzeret now, so I can play the One Ring feels pretty cool to me.
Honestly, I've been looking at the One Ring, and as people have been talking about it, I'm like, okay, do I test this in Tivit? Like, I mean, it's like
I was doing a coaching session with somebody where they brought that up, and they said it's been testing pretty decently.
Yeah. Like my thought process is its floor is it sacks to Time Sieve. So like,
sure.
Okay, that's not the worst.
I think the floor when you draw 3 cards off of one activation, I think the One Ring has done its job, right? That's where I feel with the card is that like as soon as you get to that point, you're fine. Up until that point, you're like, I don't know if this is really worth it. Yeah, draw 2 for 2 life. Like, but no, I think by the time you're drawing, like you've drawn 6 cards off of it, it's worth it.
Yeah, it seems like it's really good. My number 5.
I was gonna say back to Kinnan things. Just sorry before we go on.
Go for it.
Yeah. Like so apart from like the big flips aspect of it, the deck never really feels like it's running out of gas. It does whiff for sure on activations, but like you always feel like you're in the game because you can either whiff on an activation or hit a Seaborn Muse, or you can hit a Void Winnower or something like that, right?
Yeah, or sometimes you just activate on somebody's instep, hit a Tidespot Tyrant, and the game completely changes.
The game's over. Right. Also, that's a big part of why the deck is good, because Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespot Tyrant are 2 of the best cards in the format. You just got to figure out a way to cheat them in. Like, the cards are insane. They're so good at breaking parity on stacks. They're so good at busting through certain metas. Like, they're crazy. And then sometimes you literally just go like, oh no, I have a Basalt Monolith turn 2. Oopsies, infinite mana. Like, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's on me, I guess.
You got it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I love Kinnan. I think it's so strong. I think it's really powerful.
I also have a little bit of a strong distaste for it because my local meta back in Lincoln had two very devoted Kinnan pilots who were really good at convincing the table Kinnan was never the threat.
Yeah.
And they would win leagues like back to back. And I would just sit there and be like, guys, how many times are they going to win the fucking league before you remove the goddamn commander?
Yeah.
Like, at what point? Like, it just, that's why I will always say, if I see it, I'm going to sit and point at it and just be like, hey, don't let this stay on the battlefield too long. Hey, don't let this stay on the battlefield too long. I will always do that, much to the chagrin of you and Tyler. But my number 5 here is what was actually my number 6 last month, which is Sisay Weatherlight Captain. I have Sisay a little bit higher up. It is a green deck. However, I do think Dockside kind of bails it out a little bit. I think red decks that have green in them are kind of fine. Like they're just like, oh no, there's a Bowmasters. I guess I'll pivot onto this other.
And then the funny part is then if you're in the Collector Roof pod, you're like, oh no, thank God I have green. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like it feels so versatile and it keeps putting up results. And I also like what you were saying earlier. There's so many ways to build that deck. I way before even Rebel had even put the Jeggy version of the deck together. I had built an Underworld Breach layered with with Jace combo or deck, and it was just basically a TNT deck that was just, hey, we have this, and it gets out Jace, and it gets out stuff to get out Underworld Breach, and we win the game. And
you can Sisay can be your Thrasios for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like Sisay here. I think it's one of those decks where I could probably put it anywhere in my top 5 and feel okay with it. Outside of number 1. I don't think it's number 1, but I definitely feel like anywhere from like 2 to 5, I could put it anywhere in there.
I feel like that. Yeah. I feel like anywhere between my like 6 and my 3, I feel like it could easily be.
Yeah.
I also think like Sisay, there are certain ways, like as much as I've admonished like the great ways to, or brought up the ways that Sisay can be amazing, I also want to point out the ways that like you can play suboptimal Sisay lines at the same time, right?
Right.
And I think there are certain packages that are like necessary. I think you're either on the Cultist Dihada Chromatic Orrery package or you're on the Nicol Bolas package, and the other ways of playing the deck might not be ones that I would consider optimal.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I just, it's one of those things where I think that your ability to, it's kind of the same thing with like Tymna Kraum, right? Or Tymna Kraum is just like so malleable as to what it can be that it's just that good. So Sisay number 5, I feel is where I'm at. What's your number 4?
I don't know if you've ever heard of this deck. It was made by a pretty cool pilot. His name's Comedian MTG, and it's a deck called Bruce Thrasios. Dawnmaker Thrasios. Hey,
that's also my number 4.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying Dawnmaker's top 5 decks of the format for 2.5 years now, and I just keep being proven right. I don't. It was really funny before EDH top 16 too, because it would top 16 all the time. I would cover it in my videos. People would be like, "Oh yeah, I guess I have seen that deck around every once in a while," and then like. It was just never in the conversation until we started getting results and everyone was like, yeah, it doesn't win every tournament, but it's there all the time.
It's the best deck after turn 3, in the format by far.
Feels pretty safe. Yeah.
Like,
sure. I think it is also the best, like, gun to my head. I define this as mid-range deck in the format. Like, I think if you had to describe, like, what is archetypal mid-range in cEDH, you point to Dawnmaker and go, that's it. And then also, this is the best one of it.
I mean, it used to be like TNT was that deck, right? And now I kind of feel like Thrasios Bruce is exactly what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah,
it goes back to what I was saying is, again, I've moved down my green decks. However, it stays high because it is a green deck with red. So it's able to deal with some of the bullshit that's going on in the format.
Agreed. And like literally this came up the other day where it's like, and one of the reasons I love about this deck is that it is always presenting a win. Like always. It's like you're doing the mid-range grind until you're like, oh, time to turn the corner. And like that's what the format needs right now. The format is so fast that you need to be able to say, I'm gonna win right now. And I was playing against Tyler and Charles and one of my friends from home. And I was playing Maker, and they were like, Ian, we just exiled 2 of your win cons. How are you presenting a win this turn? And meanwhile, it's just kind of like vibing. I was like, I don't know. I'm just doing my thing. Like,
it just turns out if you just sit here and dirtle, like, you'll eventually find something else.
The optimization of putting Derevi and Bloomtender back in the deck has made it so that conundrum that we just spoke of, the how does he keep trying to win right now, is just so much more exacerbated.
Oh, and it's amazing because then you do that. Lines you put that in with it, and then you can layer your Derevi with your Emil, so then you can go get Gaia's Cradle, and then it's so good. I love that deck to death. The only unfortunate thing is it doesn't have black, so it's not a Callahan deck. And
fair.
That's kind of the thing is it's not an Esper deck, and like it's also not Azorius core enough to be a Callahan deck.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's very green.
So
it's very green blue. Yeah.
It's very much a green blue deck that
it's a green blue deck splashed. Yeah, I was gonna say splash Dockside and Ranger Captain. Like
and if you like I've said this before, like my Thrasios Tymna deck splash green and right, so I love the deck. It's very much the type of Magic that I think is very good right now. But again, like I said, I'm a little soft on green decks overall, but I do think the green decks with red get to have that advantage of, hey, we have red. That's neat. Let's go up to number 3. What do you have at number 3?
Yeah, so my top 3, I really like. Gun to my head, I could switch any of these decks. Like as much as I've been talking about the other 3, like these 3, I could easily have a very soft argument about one or the other. Like you can bring up 1 point, and I was like, all right, that's enough to tip the scales, right? Like they're all that close. But this one's,
I imagine our top 3 are like almost identical. Yeah.
Probably it's Tymna
okay,
for number 3. I think Tymna is really solid. I think anyone can go to a tournament and do really well with it. It has the inherent disadvantage of having like just a few win cons, right? I've talked about on a personal level, I like having a lot of win conditions, right?
Right.
That's why I've been looking at playing ways to play Tymna with Displacer Kitten combos in it as well. Just because I like to have just these multiple win cons that are like, I'm going to win the game. I'm going to win the game. I'm going to win the game. And then sometimes also have these grind engines too, right? And I think Tymna is a really powerful deck. I think Tymna and Crom have been 2 of my favorite commanders even before they were cool. I was trying to jam these guys back in the Flash days. I think the Opus Thief revolution that's happening right now is actually real. I worked with a patron of mine to get an Opus Thief lift up and ready to go. And they said they 2-0'd their local they just went to and just like absolutely dumpster people because they were like, oh, Bowmaster wheel. like, you know what I mean? That was the whole
how good
game.
is Alms Collect?
Yeah. But Shieldred and Bowmasters really made that deck a thing again, in my opinion. So I think, there's not only is Tymna Blue Farm, right? The classic Turbo Adnaz thing / control deck, as some people are calling it. But it's also got this potential to be an Opus Thief list right now. And I love that deck is kind of back. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways to play this color combo. It's really great colors. You get Dockside, you get Breach, you get Intuition Piles, you get Ad Nauseam. Like, there's stupid amount of stuff you get with this combo, and it's just going to keep winning. My
number 3 is not Tymna. My number 3 is Najeela, and I think again this comes back to the reoccurring motif of I'm soft on green decks right now. And I think of my top 3, I think Najeela gets hit the hardest by Bowman.
Tymna decks, we talked about this earlier.
Tymna decks do, but I think Tymna Crom just can ignore it enough. Whereas Najeela has enough, like Najeela 2 has this thing where the warrior density is so important. And Bowmaster's really good at keeping that in check.
Yeah.
And so for me, I look at that and I go, okay, so there's a reasonable world where a Tymna player a Tymna Crom player sitting at a table with a Najeela player is going to be able to convince the person who has the Bowmasters that isn't them to let them draw a card to kill a Najeela and then get rid of like some amount of warriors or whatever, right?
No, it's a thing for sure.
And so I think that hits Najeela in a way that it's kind of hard. And that's kind of one of the things that I think is a little rough about the deck. Other than that, it's a red deck. It's 5 colors. It's really good. Memo keeps kicking ass with it. Which is just super impressive. And love seeing Najeela. Well, I can't say I love Najeela doing well. I have been playing Najeela against Najeela for so long that I hate playing the deck. And I hate playing against the deck. But it's so good. It's a great deck. So
Najeela is my number 2.
My number 2 is Tymna Crom.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just because for the slight argument of like Najeela 1 got Samit, which I think is cracked. I think that card's insane. And then like I appreciate the green argument. I appreciate the Bowmasters argument, but the reason I like wasn't as worried about it was I was like, yeah, but they still have Intuition. They still have Underworld Breach. They still have Ad Nauseam. They still have like a stupid amount of cards. And also Delighted Halfling gives them uncounterable 1-card win conditions.
Multiple.
Right. So like, I don't know. I get it. I do.
Yeah.
And I think that there's once again, a stiff breeze could convince me that one is over the other at this point. Right. But I think Najeela is just really, really solid. Once again, uncounterable Derevis are really scary. I think I would actually love to see a Najeela play Spellskite. Not gonna lie, I think that would be really interesting.
I think it'd be really solid in a deck like that. Like I think it is one of those flex spots.
The Bowmasters thing too.
It cleans up a lot of those lines. And Spellskite is one of those like cards that can like soak up a lot of damage too.
Yeah.
So like it can eat a good amount of stuff.
Agreed.
I have Najeela exactly where I had it last month at 3. I didn't have it above Tivit. I didn't have it above Tymna Crom. I have Tymna Crom at 2 instead of 1 this month. And that's solely because of the fact that I think Tymna Crom is a Tymna deck, and there's Bowmasters. And Tymna Crom, I also just kind of think is mildly overhyped. And I do think it's a very good deck. I do think it's one of the top 5 best decks in the format. I think people who are trying to play it as a turbo deck are playing it incorrectly.
Suboptimally, for sure.
I think the people like Brian Koval who have continued and repeated success with it play it like it is a control deck, and that's when it does well. So it's very much a me deck. Unfortunately, it plays Nons and it plays Breach. Although I said this last month, I could make a compelling argument that it doesn't even need Nons. So I think that it is a deck that, again, very much a deck that I would play, very much a deck that I think is very good. I like it. I love it a lot. However, I do think it's fallen down because I do think Tivit is the best deck in the format right now. And I really feel strongly about that, honestly.
And that is also my number 1.
Yep.
Look at us. Now, am I biased? Absolutely.
A little bit.
For sure.
Now, I will say this. I said this on Twitter. I like that I was a month ahead of you on that thumbnail and is this the best deck in the format curve? I do like that. I got it. Well,
but you ask if something's the best thing in the format every other day, so it doesn't really count.
You're
but
like, okay.
Midnight Hunt has one good card for cEDH, but will it break it?
Okay, but to be fair, I don't say that about decks very often. I say that about every set, though. I say your piece about Tivit because I could talk about Tivit for hours. So I think as of right now, so if you notice, we both talked about Tymna Crom and Tivit, which I think these two decks and Lotho
these two decks and Atraxa get paid off by Lotho, which is my opinion for the best card from Lord of the Rings.
Card is nuts.
The card is nuts.
I said this on Twitter.
Generate, like it's like a second Dockside, in my opinion. It genuinely
it does what I think what people wanted Fairy Mastermind. Like, Fairy Mastermind is like not as good, I think, overall as people
Fairy
wanted it to be.
The Lotho at home for sure.
And Lotho is exactly what people wished it was. And so now that we have Lotho, I'm like, holy crap, this card's cracked.
Yeah, Lotho's kind of cracked. But Lotho is a great advantage engine for Atraxa and for. So I was actually talking about this earlier. I was like, previously Atraxa decks did not have a card to turn one Worldly Tutor for, like some mid-range decks do for Dockside.
Right.
And I was like, now we have Lotho. Like it legitimately is a one card mana solver. But anyways, not to divert too much. But yeah, Tivit's cracked. And one of the things about Tivit that is so strong, it's like I will say, like, Tivit's not good enough to be the definitive best deck in the format. You know what I mean? Like, the meta is not warped around Tivit. We do not need to start meta gaming for Tivit.
Right.
Tivit can lose to a Dockside like nobody's business. Tivit can...
which makes it the definitive Callahan deck, right?
Yeah,
because it's not
exactly.
a me deck unless it just feeds the fuck out of Dockside.
Yeah. So, like, it gets hit by a Mind Break Trap and then is out of the game, or like if you counter the advantage engines early, like, which is not always the way to play things, but like like you have different ways. But it has a clean one card win condition in the command zone. It has a consistent mana generation in the command zone. It has access to Esper colors, in which you can play a bunch of nice asymmetrical stacks pieces. Like,
I think Esper's the best color combination in Commander right now. That's just my hot take. But
I don't know that I agree, but I don't disagree vehemently. But I think, just
some of that's so like just a play style thing, but like
I don't know. Dockside is really good though.
Yeah, but so is like consistent mana or like card advantage and mana.
All that. But what I'm getting at with Tivit is, like, you can play Grafdigger's Cage, which is huge. I think that's like one of the biggest things is and also there've been Tivit decks without Grafdigger's Cage. Are you guys okay?
Yeah, I'm playing Aluris. Leave me alone.
Yeah, get out of here. No, I think Grafdigger's Cage is busted. You need it in that deck. I think playing Blind Obedience solves a lot of the problems Tivit was having. I think you can play so many different stacks effects like Dalthy and Dranith and Opposition Agent, and then you just like have all of these insanely high card quality pieces that just get you some advantage, and then you resolve your commander and say, like, hey, I'm going to either beat you to death or give me time to get a Displacer Kitten or get Time Sieve thing just to like pop off. And I think it does so many different things. It can answer so many different things. It can play asymmetrical board wipes. The big thing and the reason I played it at Baltimore was because it is so Bowmaster proof. Like, that deck is insanely Bowmaster proof.
Deck just doesn't care. The deck's like, oh, you hit my Esper Sentinel? Oh, no.
Mana? Yeah. You're going to pay 18 mana to kill my Tivit after making me draw 6 cards? No, thanks. Right, like, it's crazy. I don't know. And it's another deck where I jam pack it full of win cons, man. Like there's a Displacer Kitten combos. There are wheel effects with Notion Thief and Bowmasters. There's actual Thoracle Consult. There's Time Sieve. Like, it's just, you can win so easy.
The deck is, I will say this about the deck, however, because of that, I do think it is maybe one of the worst consult decks in the format, because so there are many instances where in like other Esper decks or other black decks, right, where you will be in a situation where you need to consult for something in a pinch.
Sure.
Or a great example is you have both pieces. You have Kitten, you have Mox Amber or whatever.
Oh God. Okay. No, this is a trap. You never consult for Teferi.
I understand that it's a trap, but that's my point. Is in other decks you can just do that, and you can't really do that. I
think that might just be that combo, if I'm being honest. But sure,
yeah. But it's one of those things where the type of combos that it does, like overall, just kind of need to like an extra piece. So you do kind of get dicked over by like a consult for something specific.
Sure.
and that is one of my big downsides to it. That being said, that does come with the explicit knowledge of I have had multiple instances where I have had the unfortunate experience of exiling all my win cons and still having like 30 cards left in my deck and just being like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I don't know if I have enough cards left in my deck to win with Tivit. That's my big downside with it. But I mean, other than that, like I don't see a lot of downsides to the deck.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, like there's 3 top decks here, and I think any of them could be at the top. I don't think people should start like packing Tivit specific hate because it's so above everything else that's happening. But like the deck is solid. I think if you want to do well in tournament, like bring in Tivit. And like if you look at the amount of people who play this deck, diverse pilots, bunch of people doing top performances with this list frequently. It's resistant to some of the problems we're facing right now, being Bowmaster being one of them, right? And I think it's a very solid list. It does its thing, and you can play a lot of asymmetrical stack pieces that act as like super solid tempo plays without having your deck be a stack stack.
Yep. I am so high on it. I love it. It's like really honestly, after I did is Tivit the new king of cEDH video, I like almost immediately went out. I bought a Tivit. I took apart Arden Silas and put together Tivit, and I was like, this is exactly what I wanted the deck to be. Like it's so good. I love it. Yeah. I do play a few weird cards in mind, but that's how I roll.
Wouldn't be you if it wasn't, right?
I like to test stuff. I like to see if stuff's worth my time. But
that's how things happen, right?
Yeah. But well, cool. So just for the people who don't follow the podcast, first of all, thank you for joining me this week, Ian. Love that I get to talk Magic with you again and have you on. You're one of our of the Sculpty boys who come on. You're like one of the top 3 most popular. In our comments, it's always like it's you, Reed, and Cobble are the people that are always like, hey, we want more of them. Hey, we want more of them. Hey, we want more of them. So it's always a pleasure when I get you guys on. For the handful of people who don't know where you are, who you are, tell people about your channel that is not a funny channel, and let them know how they can find you, where they can get your coaching, all that jazz.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to me. My name is Ian, also known as Comedian MTG, and you can find me over at youtube.com/@ComedianMTG. We are the largest tournament-based cEDH channel on YouTube at the current moment, which is pretty cool. And I'm currently in the midst of trying to make this content creation thing my full-time job. So I'm offering full-time cEDH coaching, basically. That's literally available whenever people are looking to do it. I have a Patreon tier that is for people who want to do a coaching session every month and get some Patreon benefits. But I also do independent coaching sessions outside of that Patreon. So you can hit me up at my email at comedianmtg@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Twitter. You can find me on Discord. Literally tag Cal in a comment on this, or find me over my own channel. And I'll get
go to the channel. Interact. Go give the comment, like, subscribe, do the stuff.
Blast the bells and all that.
No, I love having you on. It's awesome, and that's doing these monthly. I think is really interesting to kind of see how where my feelings are about stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
I remember Braden used to be like, "Oh, hey, we can't record tonight. The Lab Maniacs month in review is on." And I'd be like, "This is our only night for a week," and he'd be like, "No, I don't care."
It's just. I feel like looking back over the past month, it's interesting. I know Michael, we're going to try and do an episode with Michael and do a little bit of a recap on SCG Baltimore. Because I know that there was a lot of wild stuff that kind of were weird idiosyncrasies with a SCG doing their first CEDH event. like you all had to handwrite your deck lists, which I thought was
No,
hilarious. Or a lot of people did. The people who had, what was it, partners?
People who came the night before had to do that because they didn't figure out a better system, but then they figured out a better system. Fine.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear my thoughts on the event as they're public available, you should check out the video that at the time of this recording will have already been released on my channel, breaking down the top 16 of SCG Baltimore.
I'm really excited for that video. Okay, so full disclosure, I don't watch a lot of content on YouTube. Mostly because it's hard to get me to pay attention to things in general. And then I also edit and I run this thing as my full-time job. So I need to be able to pay attention. And so when stuff comes out, it's like stuff that I have to care about. And it's literally like you and Play to Win are the things that I watch. And like, I don't even watch their gameplay. I just like watch their podcast every Friday. And then I watch your breakdowns every week. And I'm just like, okay, well, that's my cEDH content for the week. Let's go.
I basically do the same thing, but obviously switch me with you. So
you know, I do what I can. Thank you guys for tuning in this week. This has been another episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast. If you want to support the show, you can go on over to patreon.com/Mind Sculptors. And you can support us there. Obviously, it's a little bit wacky over there right now. I need to actually do something with the Patreon that is not just existing. But, you know, it's almost like moving is really disrupts stuff, especially when you do a weekly podcast.
For sure.
We weren't last. So I haven't told the story yet. Is last week. So we were going to do this episode a week ago. And the entire reason I didn't is because we had came in, we moved in on like a Wednesday or Thursday. I forget what day of the week, but we called AT&T to get our fiber internet set up. This lady takes all of her information, goes, all right, cool. We're sending you a thing. Your box tomorrow will be there tomorrow. And you just set it up, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Thursday comes, we sit there. Okay. We called on Thursday. So Friday comes, we're sitting there, I'm waiting for it. And we haven't heard anything, haven't got a confirmation email, anything. So I go, hey, why don't we, instead of calling this local number that has gone to voicemail twice, let's just call AT&T proper and see if this went through. And evidently, this person just took our information and ran, and they didn't make the order. So we had to request it again. Put that all stuff. Well, because it was Friday, we didn't get our modem and stuff until Monday. And then once it got here, because of that whole situation, I sat with AT&T customer support for almost 2 hours trying to get our modem set up. Because the customer service lady had to manually put in all of the modem's information into our account in order for it to work. It was a nightmare. I have had easier time setting up Spectrum internet, which is fucking wild. But yeah, it's just fun moving stuff, guys. But no, we're here in Louisville. I'm going to try and see if I can make it out to SCG Con Cincinnati here in a few weeks. And then I'll definitely be going to, there's some Cincinnati, there's a couple tournaments going on there's one in Cincinnati, a cEDH tournament going on in Cincinnati, I think like at the end of July that I'm going to be at. And then there's another tournament here in Louisville that kind of unclear whether or not you can use proxies or not. So I'm just not going to. And that is like end of July. And I think the other one's like a week or two before that. But so I'll be playing some more cEDH like that. And then I'm also going to try and get in on some of this like master stuff. Now that I'm established in a place, I'm not in this weird middle ground. I'm actually going to play Magic instead of just talking about it. But All that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. And from all of us here at the Mind Sculptors, I'm Callahan, and we'll see you next time.
아무렇지도 못한 상처 속에 의미를 찾고 있는 날. Tell me what you wanna